What's good, YouTube? It's your boy, Blue Blood Sports TV, back at y'all with another one. So, we got some serious fighting words going on. As undefeated 3 division world champion, former junior welterweight undisputed world champion, currently the WBO welterweight world champion, and is widely considered the #1 pound for pound fighter in the world, Terence Bud Crawford. He will be taking on former IBF welterweight world champion, British superstar boxer Special K, Kell Brook, this Saturday night, November 14th, in Las Vegas, Nevada, at the MGM on ESPN. Don't miss it. With that said, Kell Brook, obviously, and Terence Crawford are going to have press conferences because they have to build up this fight and promote it. But Kell Brook says that he's taking this fight very, very serious. And when doing a recent interview, Kell Brook states that his confidence that he could defeat Terence Crawford stems from a few things. He says, number one is the fact that he doesn't have to make weight. He hadn't ballooned up into weight levels where he has to drain himself and not have anything left in the tank when fight night does occur. He says, so the fact that I got older, I got wiser, and I understand how to take care of my body and myself going into the fights, in between fights. He says I hadn't ballooned up in weight. He says, this wasn't a camp where I had to, this wasn't a weight loss camp. This was strictly strategic and to focus on and hone in on defeating and being successful against Terence Crawford. With that, he states that he believes, that's number one. So he says that he believes he will have energy from rounds 1 through 12 if needed. Then he goes back to his old saying of the chocolate brownies, in which he refers to his fists as his chocolate brownies, right? And so he says, when I land these chocolate brownies on that number 2 reason for him being confident, that weak chin of Terence Bud Crawford, I'll be very, very surprised as I watched him hurt, staggered, and even he felt like he was dropped in his last fight against Igis Kavaluskas. He says, I'll be super surprised to see Terence Crawford's chin stand up to my power, my chocolate brownies. I'll be super surprised to see Terence Crawford be able to withstand the power that I have, what I'm going to dish out. He says, if he is able to, at any point in time, take my punches, he says, then he will have the most granite chin in the sport of boxing. He says, he will not stand up to my punches. He says, the whole world understands that Terence Crawford has a very weak chin. He has no chin. He says, and another reason, number 3, is that Terence Crawford, along with that weak chin, has very little legs. He says, so his little legs, along with his weak chin, just is a no-no when you get in the ring with a guy that's a big welterweight like myself, that's very skillful, very technical, and has so much power. So he says, that's a recipe for disaster for Terence Crawford, and I'm looking to shock the world. Ultimately, I'm going to knock out Terence Crawford. He says, I'm prepared physically to go 12 rounds, but if it does go 12 rounds, I'm going to be surprised. That means he stood up to my power, and I don't think he can. Wow. We know Terence Crawford recently stated that he knows Kell Brook has quit in fights, Gennady Golovkin, Errol Spence fight. He says that he's going to make him quit again. I believe that Terence Crawford's chin gets too much limelight, and people horn on that to say he doesn't have a weak chin because you saw him staggered in the fight with Yuriorkis Gamboa. You saw him, essentially, most people thought he hit the deck against Igis Kavaluskas. The thing is, I believe that Terence Crawford's chin is fool's gold. Why do I believe that? Because maybe he doesn't have the most sturdy chin, the most granted chin, not Danny Garcia type of chin or Canelo Alvarez type of chin. you know, Errol Spence types of chin. No, maybe he don't have that type of chin. But what Terence Crawford does is he opens himself up against certain levels of opponents, and he makes himself vulnerable to getting hit. He looks to make it an action-packed fight. So at times he does get hit because he looks to mix it up. But when Terence Crawford is in the ring with certain levels of opponents, he doesn't always do that. You didn't see him rushing in against Jose Benavidez because he knew Jose Benavidez had a long reach and he had a lot of power. He didn't rush in against Victor Postol because he knew Victor Postol was technically sound and had a lot of power with a long reach. So he's very wary when it comes to certain levels of opponents that he steps in the ring with. And then there's just some opponents, I believe Terence Crawford just doesn't respect them, and he goes for broke, like Igis Kavaluskas in his last fight. He just was mixing it up from the opening bell. Even Andre Ward, legendary former pound-for-pound king who's retired undefeated, he stated, I don't like the fact that Terence Crawford is getting hit so much. He's being defensively irresponsible. And that's due to the fact that Terence Crawford simply didn't respect Igis Kavaluskas, and he wanted to make it action-packed, and he wanted to knock him out. So thus, in return, Terence Crawford got buzzed, and he got dropped, right? It was unofficial. The referees didn't count it as a knockdown, nor did the judges, but it was definitely a knockdown. But nonetheless, that wouldn't have occurred if Terence Crawford would have simply just relied on the skills that we know he has, the abilities that we know he has in his slick boxing skill set, in his athletic movement, laterally or change of direction. He has very good footwork, and he has great boxing abilities from the outside. He can be very technical from the orthodox stance or the southpaw stance, right? Terence Crawford could pick you apart from range or in mid-range. But sometimes, like I said, Terence Crawford gets in this bad habit, and I'm going to say it's a bad habit, of wanting to exchange and mix it up with his opponents, thus rendering himself vulnerable to getting hit with big punches that he's susceptible to because he just throws all defensive responsibility out the window at that point in time. He's looking to ooh and ah the fans, and he's looking to make it action-packed. Not to mention, ultimately, he's just looking to get his opponent out of there. And so with that said, I think the fact that, does he have the greatest chin in the world? No. But can he protect the chin? Absolutely, when he wants to. It's not easy just to touch Terence Crawford's chin. I believe this is becoming too much of a agenda, a thing that people are starting to say they're overstating the fact that you could get to Terence Crawford's chin at will. That's not the case. He allows you to get to his chin. Now, I will say this. He cannot make such mistakes with a guy like Kell Brook. He cannot make such mistakes with a guy like Errol Spence Jr. He cannot make such mistakes, or should I say, such decisions with a guy like Manny Pacquiao. Bad decisions. And I'm saying that Terence Crawford is far too savvy. His ring IQ is very high. He understands who to do it with and who not to do it with. So I do not believe that you're going to see the version of Terence Crawford that you saw against Igis Kavaluskas. I do believe you're going to see the version of Terence Crawford that fought Jose Benavidez. It's a total different version. He's going to make Kell Brook think. He's going to make Kell Brook use his footwork, which Kell Brook's footwork doesn't stand up to Terence Crawford's footwork. He's going to make Kell Brook use energy because he understands that Kell Brook, since 2017, has been fighting at 154, not 147. So he's going to test his endurance. He's going to test his stamina. He's going to make him follow him around the ring. He's going to make this a chess match. And Terence Crawford is ultimately going to start to pick Kell Brook apart, in my opinion. And he's going to see if Kell Brook's two broken orbital bones will hold up. Now, Kell Brook told the world that he had 2 metal plates reinforcing those orbital bones, and they're stronger than they've ever been. So Terence Crawford is definitely going to test it. Just because they're strong, they may not break, but but their swelling will occur should Terence Crawford hit the right spots. And that swelling causes you to not be able to see out your eyes, which in returns gets the fight stops. Because I don't believe it was the pain ultimately against Gennady Golovkin or Errol Spence that caused Kell Brook to not be able to continue. I think it was simply the fact that he could not see, so he couldn't see the punches coming, and that's due to the swelling. The eyes didn't. He had a fight with Safari, and he was pouring out his eye because he thought there was swelling occurring. So as long as his vision is impaired, then that will get the fight stopped in itself. He doesn't have to re-injure it. Orbital bone doesn't have to break. It just simply start to swell and cause puffiness, which impairs his vision and now allows him to continue. And this is what I think that's going to ultimately happen, the outcome in this fight by the 9th, 10th round, because Terence Crawford is very, very accurate. Terence Crawford is very, very sharp. Terence Crawford hits hard, and he's very athletic and very quick. So there will be punches that Kell Brook doesn't see coming. Now, Kell Brook can be very physical. Kell Brook is very strong. Kell Brook has a beautiful jab, and he's technical. But like I stated, Kell Brook's footwork doesn't match up with Terence Crawford's footwork. And ultimately, I think that that's going to be the downfall for Kell Brook. This is a bad matchup. I think even prior to Kell Brook, I've been stating this all week, prior to Kell Brook even injuring his eyes against Gennady Golovkin and Errol Spence, I think that Kell Brook and with Terence Crawford was a bad matchup for Kell Brook. It was in Terence Crawford's favor at any point in time in Kell Brook's career, because Kell Brook could be very robotic at times. Kell Brook could be very stiff and very predictable. And that's a no-no when you're dealing with a guy that can make adjustments and has so many tools in the toolbox, can switch from orthodox to southpaw. That is a recipe for disaster when you cannot move your feet as quick as your opponents. When they're switching, using angles and using utilizing the ring and coming in and coming out mid-range, and you can't truly gauge their range. See, Terence Crawford can give up his range at times and fight right in the pocket. But when Terence Crawford decides to utilize the mid-range and the outside and then come inside at times and mix it up, very difficult to gauge because you never truly get his timing down. And if you, Kell Brook, you need to cut off the ring and get his timing down. I see a lot of people saying, well, Kell Brook, big, strong, and has a high ring IQ, as he does. And a lot of people feel like, and I'm hearing people say that he's going to be able to cut off the ring. His feet are not fast enough to consistently cut off the ring on Terence Crawford. At times, he may have success cutting the ring off on Terence Crawford, but he will not consistently be able to do that throughout the fight, every second, every minute of every round, like Sean Porter can do. That's not going to be the case with Kell Brook. Kell Brook had success against Gennady Golovkin, Errol Spence, and Sean Porter as he beat Sean Porter because they were there. They continued to fight him in the pocket. Errol Spence chose that fight. Gennady Golovkin, that's just who he is. And Sean Porter chose that fight as well, as we saw Sean Porter against Danny Garcia and against Yordenis Ugas use a complete different style that we have never even known Sean Porter had in the toolbox. So with that said, Sean Porter decided to use a complete different style against those guys, but against Kell Brook, he just kept pressing the fight, kept being aggressive and being right there for Kell Brook to use excessive holding, for Kell Brook to use his size and his strength as an advantage. Same situation with Gennady Golovkin and Errol Spence. Why he was having so much success? Because he's a big, strong, strapping welterweight like Gennady Golovkin and like Errol Spence. Or should I say, he's nearly as big as Gennady Golovkin at 5'9" and, a very muscular guy. He's more suited for 54 than 60, but he's not much smaller than Gennady Golovkin. He's not as strong as Gennady Golovkin. But him and Errol Spence are the same size. So that was just the rubber meeting the road with Errol Spence. And with Gennady Golovkin, his size ultimately took over. But again, they weren't presenting the problem of being slick and utilizing the ring. So if Terence Crawford commits to utilizing the ring and being slick and using all the tools in the toolbox, I think this would be a fairly easy fight for Terence Crawford to win. But if Terence Crawford commits to fighting on the inside like he did against Egis Kavaluskas, then I think Terence Crawford could be in a bit of trouble. I still think he's going to win the fight because he's just sharper than Kell Brook on the inside. But he'll make it a much tougher fight where Kell Brook will have a lot of success. But I think ultimately he still breaks him down. With that said, if Terence Crawford chooses to utilize the ring, Kell Brook's footwork is not quick enough to keep Terence Crawford consistently cutting him off and keep him fighting his fight in the pocket in close range. So ultimately, I think that Kell Brook is, mistaken by thinking that Terence Crawford is chinny and going to be there for the pickings. I think that he's overstating Terence Crawford's leg size. I don't understand why that even plays a part. Everybody always talks about Deontay Wilder's small legs, but he's still the hardest puncher and the hardest hitter in the history of sport of boxing, at a 97% knockout ratio. So leg size, yes, your power comes from your legs, but it's also how you transfer it from your legs to your arms. And Terence Crawford knows how to, maximize on his physical abilities and his physical stature. So I think that Kell Brook is making a mistake by thinking that he's going to be able to knock out Terence Crawford, and think that he's making a mistake by thinking Terence Crawford is very chinny. No, he could be a dog and want to fight and make himself susceptible to getting hit with big punches and getting buzzed. That won't be the case with Kell Brook, because I believe that Terence Crawford will not engage in that type of fight. I think it's going to be a high level chess match for Terence Crawford. I think Kell Brook is going to be looking to make it a physical fight, and I think that's going to be the case all night until eventually I think Terence Crawford stops Kell Brook because of injuries. But let's see how this all plays out. Drop a comment in the comment section. Let me know what y'all think. Y'all already know what it is. It's your boy Blue Blood Sports TV. Hate, like, comment, and subscribe. You haven't subscribed, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, hit the bell icon to get all the new notification. Follow me on Instagram at Blue Blood Sports TV, all one word. Y'all already know what it is. Shout out to the entire LDBC. Shout out to New Media. Shout out to Black Media Row. Make sure you like and share these videos. That's all I got for y'all. Peace.